Well, good afternoon and welcome to Pay Entry's weekly webinar. Today we're going to be talking about HR metrics, something we don't look at a lot, but it is an important feature that HR can use to qualify themselves on the executive team. We're going to talk about what are HR metrics. And by the way, I'm Kathy Graham. I forgot to mention my name. I'm Kathy Graham. I'm head of the HR Services Division. And you do have a handout of this presentation in your little box with all of your instructions and things on it. There's a handout in PDF format. And also, if you have any questions that you want answered, please type them into the questions block. We will have a Q&A at the end of this session. So we're going to talk about what are HR metrics and why should we even measure them? What should be measured? And once you measure it, what should you do with the information? You know, sometimes HR, back when I started in HR, it was called personnel. And the personnel department, and we had a big place when it came to planning parties. And now if somebody asks me to plan a party, I run the other direction. HR is a lot different nowadays. HR usually has a seat on the executive team or as part of the team that makes decisions for the company. And when you're in that kind of a position, it is very important to prove yourself, to make sure that the staff believes that you know what you're talking about. And one of the ways that you can do that and impress people is to shove a bunch of numbers under their noses. So, you know, your CFO loves numbers. So that's why metrics are very important in HR today. They're also important for making big decisions. So what are HR metrics? HR metrics are measurements that are used to determine the value and effectiveness of HR initiatives, typically including such areas as turnover, training, return on human capital, cost of labor, expenses per employee, and there are a few other things there too that you may come up with within your own organization. And why should we measure these? Because then your decisions that you make are based on data rather than hunches. When you come to make a presentation about a benefit or a program that you want to add to the company, you have data to back you up, not just a feeling in your gut. You have data that proves that the company will benefit from this program or benefit. It provides a basis for analysis. It can help you gain insight into problems. Why is this happening? Why is our turnover so high? It can help you resolve issues because you do get insight into the problem. You can get to the source of the issue. It helps you to foster new strategies, a new program that you want to put in place, something that has to do with engagement to keep the turnover lower, perhaps. And key decisions are much easier to sell if you have the facts. It also, as I mentioned, creates HR relevance. It shows how HR impacts the return on investment for the company. So, what should be measured? Because you can measure a lot of different things. Well, first of all, identify measurements that connect to the company's strategy, their objectives, or their existing issues and problems. If you know that your turnover rate is high, that you're losing a lot of employees in the first 90 days, this may help you determine why. Identify company issues for analysis. Align measurements with company objectives. And it creates an HR scorecard. So here's just a visual of all of the things that can be measured. We're not going to talk about all of these today, but you see in here, time to hire, measuring absenteeism, your engagement rating, um, time since the last promotion of a person, or your turnover rate. So there are a lot of things here. They present 14. You may have things that you would add to this list. And these can go down to departmental levels and not just the entire company, but you could look at the turnover or absenteeism in one department and try to hone in on the issues in that one area. So remember, you're not measuring just for the company sometimes, you're measuring individual divisions or departments. The top 10 metrics out there start with revenue per employee, the rate of absenteeism, employee turnover, and normally that's calculated on an annual basis, the cost of turnover, the cost per hire, how long does it take you to hire, so the time to hire, what's your acceptance ratio of offers that you make, what is your new hire fail rate, how many people leave in the first 90 days, your utilization percent of a particular benefit or program. You can look at benefit costs as a percent of compensation. That's a really well utilized one. So those are the top 10 metrics. Not all the metrics, but the top 10. The first one we're going to talk about is that revenue per employee. This helps you determine the value of your employee to your business. It's valuable information for a CEO or a CFO in planning for future expansion. And here's how you calculate it. The revenue per employee equals the total company revenue divided by the total number of employees. Pretty straightforward. So let's talk about rate of absenteeism. Absence from work can show patterns, and you can measure it by the total company, your department, a manager, or a particular individual. This tracks the percentage of time that workers are absent from work on scheduled work days. The formula for this metric is that absenteeism equals the number of workdays missed divided by the total number of workdays scheduled. You can look at this in a quarter or annually or any length of time. Turnover rate is a very important metric in HR and is used very frequently. Turnover costs an estimated 33% of a worker's annual salary. At the U.S. median salary of $45,000, that's about $15,000 per person that you have to pay to hire someone else. It adds up quickly. So turnover rate is used to determine employee satisfaction. It can be calculated for any time frame, as I mentioned earlier, annually, quarterly, or monthly, dependent on where you want to focus. It also can be calculated by any group or area, division, location, department, or manager to get a sense of how well that area is functioning. The formula for calculating your turnover rate is the number of terminations divided by the average number of employees, and you would determine what time period you're looking at here. Is it the number of terminations in a year over the average number of employees in a year? Turnover, as I mentioned, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, is expensive. So to measure cost of turnover, you would look at the total costs of separation plus filling the vacancy, replacement of the vacancy, plus training. So the cost of turnover would be anything that you pay as a part of the separation, plus these three other things: vacancy, replacement, and training. Vacancy meaning while the person's not in the job, are you having to pay a temp to do it? Is someone else picking up the slack and there's overtime? and then the replacement costs, hiring, ads, time to interview, etc. And then the time that it takes to train someone. So this is what your turnover costs. Your costs per hire measures the expenses that are incurred to hire and onboard a new employee. In this, you would consider all your recruiting costs, any fees that you pay to agencies for assisting you in that process, your applicant tracking system, the time that employees and managers spend interviewing, and then the time and effort that it takes to onboard and train the person. The cost for this, I'm sorry, the formula for this is the cost per hire equals all recruiting and staffing costs divided by the number of new hires. Time to hire. This is important, especially in today's tight marketplace. This includes your internal and your external hires. And a lot of times today, I will interject here that employers are finding that they choose an internal candidate to speed up the process for a higher level position and then train the person to hire a new person to take the lower level position so that they can promote people and then get they're already trained in many ways. Determine whether you're counting calendar days or work days. So that's one distinction that you have to make first. So the time to hire is the total days taken to fill the positions divided by the number of hires. Pretty straightforward. Your offer acceptance ratio looks at what percent of people that are offered jobs accept the offer. If the job acceptance ratio is low, it may indicate that you're offering too little money or that your benefits and culture are not in sync with the candidate desires. If it's high, then it looks like you're paying what the market's offering and that your culture and benefits are appealing. A good target is to look at 70 to 90% of offers accepted. So if you're less than 70%, you need to go back and look at what's wrong. The offer acceptance ratio is the number of offers extended divided by the number of offers accepted. Your new hire fail rate. This is a real key analysis because if you have a high rate, something's wrong. It shows how many employees leave your company after starting. Pick a target time frame. I would say 90 days is probably better than a year, but you can also measure a year. But look at 90 days because 48% of those who start a new job, I just read recently, leave that job because the job expectations or the benefits and pay that they thought they were going to get are not what they thought. So there's some disappointment or some unhappiness there right up front. Um, if you have a high rate of turnover in the first 90 days, it could indicate a need to change the process that you're using to select people. Are you showing them the job description so that they know what the job is like? Do you have a good onboarding process where they don't feel lost and alone? Are you creating inclusion right up front? To make sure that those individuals feel like they're part of the team. If not, you're going to have a higher turnover rate in the first 90 days. So your new hire fail rate is equal to the number of new hires that quit or are fired divided by the total number of new hires during the same time frame. And that probably could be calculated annually or you can calculate it every 90 days if you have that many new hires. Utilization rate, that can be used to show participation in any program. A lot of times it is used to decide how effective and how well received a new benefit is, or a new program that you've put in place. You would look at the numbers of people utilizing the benefit or the program. Utilization rate is the total number of employees that are utilizing the program or benefit divided by the total number of employees eligible to utilize this program. So how many out of the total are using it? What percentage? Benefits as a percent of total compensation. This is done all the time. CFOs want to know, well, what are the benefit costs as a percent of our total compensation? And that's a good number to have for your company so you can compare it to the national average. These are most commonly used to determine how competitive the company is for benefits. It's used in employee communication and in total compensation statements. And it's also used to make changes to your benefits as a whole. The way to calculate this is you look at your benefits as a percent of total compensation equal to the total annual benefit costs divided by the total annual payroll dollars. So benefit cost divided by payroll cost. So what do you do with the data? Well, HR metrics are data points that can tell you what's happening in your organization. It can point out problems in certain areas or departments or as a whole for the company. It gives you an insight into into a problem that you may not have known existed. Further analysis on your part can uncover why those things are happening. Why is your turnover high in the first 90 days? Um, what are your benefit costs related to your compensation? Maybe that's a reason you have so many individuals that are turning down your job offers. So you can get to the bottom of things with numbers, and you can prove your point with numbers. Together, they assist in creating a strategy that moves the needle on business goals, helps you to sell things to upper management. So how do you start measuring? If you're not measuring right now, start small, pick a couple of these, and decide that you're going to start measuring these and reporting the numbers to management. Review your business strategy for long and short-term goals to ensure that you're aligned with the management team and what they're looking at. If you're off measuring something that doesn't matter to the management team, you're wasting your time. So pick something that is aligned with your business strategy. Define each metric and its formula. Not all companies define metrics the same way. You may have a little bit of a nuance to the way you measure turnover or other things that we've talked about. Determine what data must be collected and how you're going to collect it. A lot of times you have it right in your payroll system. You can pull the, um, you know, how long someone's been there, what your, how many people you hired last month, how many people you hired last year, what your turnover, how many people exited. That's where you get some of your data. And a lot of your data you're going to get from things like benefit plan invoices, what your cost of benefits, what's your cost of health insurance, your life insurance that you buy for employees, that kind of thing. And you can get your total compensation from for the year from your payroll statements or your payroll registers, really. Decide how frequent you're going to measure something, how frequently. You may not do it monthly, you may do it quarterly. That's a good time frame to start. Annually won't give you much of time to, I mean, I guess if you're measuring your benefits and it's before open enrollment time, then you may be able to ramp up your benefits during that time. So just decide, it may be different for each one of your measurements that you're going to do or things that you're going to measure. Choose your reporting format and who you're going to give this data to. And then review the above on a regular basis to make sure that your data is still relevant. Now go back in a year and see what how your business strategy has changed, and how you need to revamp your formulas or what you're measuring to be in line with that. And then start over again. You redefine your metrics, determine where you're going to get your data, decide how frequently you're going to manage it, and who's going to get those results. So it's a process. It's a very important process, and it does um, make accounting people take a second look at HR people because they've actually used numbers, and that's not common. So we're at the end of this presentation. Do you have any questions? If you do and have typed them into the chat, I'm going to look now. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now. I'll give it just a minute to see if anyone has a question. And I don't think we do. So I'm going to let you go a few minutes early. If you want answers to your questions, email me. As a pay entry client, you have access to our HR team to answer questions for a reasonable length of time, and to get some help from us for a form, a policy, a procedure, etc. It's part of your payroll package, so you need to utilize that. If you need a question answered, give us a call or send us an email. Thanks for attending today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can use it, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.